The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 3 million years. Its walls were carved from the heart of a dead star, polished until they shone like black mirrors. 12 species had built this place together in an age when humanity was still learning to walk upright. Now those same 12 species sat in their ancient seats, watching the children of the galaxy take their first steps into a much larger universe. Ambassador Laura Mitchell stood at the center of the chamber floor. She wore the formal blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. At 62 years old, she had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. 40 years of service, 30 years of studying alien languages and customs, 20 years of dreaming about this exact day, the day humanity would finally be welcomed into the galactic family. Behind her stood a small delegation of humans. Danny Reeves was the youngest among them, barely 25, serving as a junior on his first major assignment. He kept his hands clasped behind his back to hide the fact that they were shaking. Beside him stood Dr. Carroll, the teams, and Captain Henry Blake, who commanded the diplomatic vessel that had carried them across 300 light years to reach this place. The council members watched from their elevated seats arranged in a perfect circle around the chamber floor. Laura had studied each species extensively, but seeing them in person still took her breath away. They were beings of living crystal, their bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns that shifted with their emotions. They resembled something between a bird and a flower, their delicate forms covered in feathers that chimed like bells when they moved. The massive thornbacks looked like armored beetles standing upright, each one weighing several tons, their shells from centuries of ritual combat. The High Speaker of the Council was unnamed. His crystalline form pulsed with soft blue light as he raised one appendage to call the chamber to order. The musical tones of the universal tongue filled the space as he spoke. "We gather today for a sacred ceremony," announced. "A new species has proven itself worthy of joining our community. They have achieved faster-than-light travel. They have demonstrated the capacity for peaceful contact. They have passed the trials of understanding. Today, we welcome the beings who call themselves humanity." Laura felt her heart swell with pride. Generations of humans had worked toward this moment. The scientists who had cracked the secrets of faster-than-light travel. The diplomats who had made first contact without causing an interstellar incident. The billions of ordinary people back on Earth who had chosen peace over fear when they learned they were not alone in the universe. "As is tradition," continued, "we shall now enter the newcomers into the great archive. The resonance shall translate their world's name into the universal tongue, so that all species may know them by their true designation." A column of light appeared in the center of the chamber. This was the resonance, an artificial intelligence older than most of the species present. It had been built by the precursors, a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only their technology and their warnings. The resonance served as the keeper of all knowledge, the translator of all languages, the memory of the galaxy itself. Laura watched with quiet excitement as the light pulsed and shifted. This was a formality, nothing more. Every species went through this naming ceremony, the translated to sanctuary of light, that came from world of endless song. Even the fearsome thornbacks hailed from a planet whose name meant Garden of Strength. These names were beautiful, poetic, revealing something essential about each species and their relationship with their birthplace. The resonance began to speak. Its voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It simply was, the way starlight simply was, or gravity or time. Processing linguistic data from the newcomer species. Analyzing terminology across 7,243 distinct languages and dialects. Cross-referencing cultural contexts, mythological frameworks, and historical usage patterns. Danny leaned close to Laura and whispered, "Is it supposed to take this long?" Laura frowned. He was right. The other naming ceremonies she had studied in preparation for this day had been quick affairs. A few seconds of processing, then the beautiful translated name would appear. But the resonance had been working for nearly a minute now, and its light was flickering in patterns she had never seen before. The council members noticed it too. His crystal body shifted from calm blue to an uneasy yellow. The delegation began to chirp nervously among themselves. Even the stoic Thornbacks were exchanging glances. Anomaly detected, the resonance announced. The newcomer world's designation triggers Protocol 7, accessing the Forbidden Archive for cross-reference. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. Laura did not know what Protocol 7 meant, but she could see from the reactions around her that it was significant. Rose from his seat, his crystalline form now pulsing with urgent red light. "Resonance, explain yourself," the High Speaker demanded. "The Forbidden Archive has not been accessed in 400,000 years. What could possibly require such measures?" "The newcomer world's name matches a precursor-era designation," the resonance replied. "A warning marker placed upon a specific planet 3 billion years before present. The marker was meant to alert all future civilizations to the nature of this world and the potential danger of its inhabitants." Laura felt cold fear creeping up her spine. This was not how the ceremony was supposed to go. She looked at her team and saw the same confusion and concern reflected on their faces. Danny had gone pale. Carol was frantically trying to access her translation database. Henry had shifted his weight into a defensive stance, an old soldier's instinct taking over. "What warning?" demanded. "What danger?" The resonance fell silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice seemed to carry a weight it had not possessed before. Translation complete. The newcomer world, known to its inhabitants as Earth, carries the following designation in the universal tongue: Prime. Secondary classification: the Nursery of Soldiers. Precursor warning attached to this file reads as follows: "Do not wake what sleeps here." The chamber erupted into chaos. The delegation burst into panicked song. The council members blazed with colors Laura had no names for. The Thornback ambassador rose to his full height, his massive form casting a shadow across half the chamber. Laura stood frozen at the center of it all, unable to understand what had just happened. She had come here expecting a celebration. Instead, she had just watched her entire species be branded with a name that sounded like a threat. She looked up at the council members, at the fear and hostility now visible on faces that had been welcoming just moments ago, and she realized that humanity's first day in the galactic community was going to be much harder than anyone had anticipated. The chaos in the council chamber took nearly an hour to subside. Laura stood perfectly still through all of it, her diplomatic training the only thing keeping her upright as she watched the galaxy's oldest civilizations react to her species with naked terror. They had retreated to the far end of their seating area, their musical voices now sharp with discord. The pulse through colors so rapidly that their light show became almost painful to watch. Even the massive Thornbacks had drawn closer together, their armored bodies forming a defensive cluster. Finally, managed to restore order. His crystalline form had settled into a deep purple that Laura's studies told her indicated extreme distress. The High Speaker raised both appendages and let out a tone so low it vibrated through the floor beneath Laura's feet. "Silence," he commanded. "We are the Council. We do not panic, we assess. We deliberate, we decide." The chamber slowly quieted. Laura took a deep breath and stepped forward. "High Speaker, there has clearly been some misunderstanding," she said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "We are not soldiers. We are not weapons. We are simply explorers who want to join your community in peace." Turned his attention to her, and Laura fought the urge to step back. The alien's gaze felt like standing under a spotlight made of ice. "Resonance," said, not taking his eyes off Laura, "explain the designation. What is a—" The column of ancient light flickered as the artificial intelligence accessed its archives. When it spoke, Its voice carried the weight of 3 billion years of accumulated knowledge. It is a planetary classification created by the precursors to identify worlds with environmental conditions so extreme that they would naturally produce apex predators of exceptional capability. Standard habitability parameters define acceptable gravity between 0.7 and 1.1 galactic standard, acceptable temperature variance of no more than 20 degrees across the planetary surface, stable atmospheric composition, minimal seismic and volcanic activity, predictable weather patterns. The resonance paused, its light pulsing more intensely. The world-designated Earth fails every single parameter. Gravity is elevated at 1.03 galactic standard. Temperature variance exceeds 150 degrees between polar and equatorial regions. Atmospheric composition includes dangerously high oxygen levels that make the entire planet a fire hazard. Seismic activity is constant across multiple fault lines. Volcanic systems remain active on every continental mass. Weather patterns are not only unpredictable but actively hostile, including electrical storms, frozen precipitation, wind systems capable of destroying structures, and massive rotating air columns that devastate everything in their path. Danny made a small sound behind Laura. She could not tell if it was fear or disbelief. The precursors classified Earth as unsuitable for colonization or observation. The resonance continued. They flagged it as a world that would either destroy any life that evolved upon it or forge that life into something unprecedented. They chose to leave a warning and move on, believing that any species capable of surviving such conditions would be too dangerous to contact. The Thornback ambassador rose from his seat. His name was, and Laura's briefings had described him as a decorated warrior from a species that valued martial prowess above all else. His voice rumbled like distant thunder when he spoke. I have studied the human data packets submitted with their application for council membership. I found them curious at the time. Now I find them terrifying. He activated a holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images began to appear, pulled from Earth's own historical records. These creatures evolved alongside predators that would destroy any other sentient species, said. Images of lions, wolves, bears, and sharks rotated through the display. They did not flee. They did not hide. They hunted these predators. They drove many of them to extinction. They took others and bent them to their will, forming alliances with creatures that should have been their natural enemies. The image shifted to show ancient humans, with domesticated wolves at their sides. They did not simply survive there, continued, his voice heavy with something that sounded almost like respect mixed with fear. They conquered it. They spread to every corner of their planet, no matter how hostile. Frozen wastelands, burning deserts, dense jungles, the depths of their oceans. There is no environment on their world they did not invade and claim as their own. Carol stepped forward beside Laura. These are normal survival adaptations, she protested. Every species adapts to its environment. Turned his massive head toward her. No, not like this. Show them resonance. Show them what the humans call endurance hunting. The holographic display changed again. Laura felt her stomach drop as she watched a visual reconstruction of something she had learned about in school, but never truly considered from an outside perspective. The image showed early humans chasing prey across an open savanna, not running fast, just jogging steadily, following, always following. The prey animal would sprint away, then stop to rest. The humans would appear again, still coming, never stopping. The cycle repeated again and again, sprint and rest, until finally the prey collapsed from exhaustion and the humans walked up to it calmly and finished it without effort. They do not need to be faster than their prey, said into the horrified silence. They do not need to be stronger. They simply do not stop. They will chase their target until it dies from exhaustion. This is their fundamental hunting strategy. This is how they evolved. The delegation fled the chamber entirely at this point. Their musical cries echoed through the corridors as they retreated, unable to bear any more revelations. Its crystalline form had shifted to a color Laura did not recognize, something between gray and black that seemed to absorb light rather than refract it. "There is more," the High Speaker said quietly. "Is there not resonance?" Affirmative. The humans have survived multiple extinction-level events during their evolutionary history. Ice ages that covered their world in frozen death, volcanic eruptions that blocked their sun for years, asteroid impacts that reshaped their continents, disease outbreaks that killed significant portions of their population, resource wars that devastated their civilizations. In each case, they recovered, they rebuilt, they emerged stronger than before. The resonance paused, then added the detail that seemed to disturb the council most of all. Most recently, the humans discovered the secret of nuclear fission and constructed weapons capable of destroying all life on their planet. They deployed these weapons twice against their own kind, and then they chose not to destroy themselves. They possessed the means for total annihilation and instead developed systems to prevent it, while continuing to build more such weapons. They currently maintain enough nuclear armaments to sterilize their world several times over, yet they have not used them since their initial deployment. This suggests a species capable of extreme violence that actively chooses restraint. Laura wanted to explain. She wanted to tell them about the peace movements, the treaties, the generations of people who had worked to ensure those weapons would never be used again. But looking at the faces around her, she realized that every explanation would only make things worse. To the galaxy, humanity had just been revealed as the most dangerous species they had ever encountered, and nothing Laura could say would change that first terrible impression. The council called a recess that stretched into 3 full days. Laura and her team were confined to their quarters in the diplomatic wing of the station, not as prisoners exactly, but certainly not as honored guests. Armed guards from 4 different species stood watch outside their doors at all times. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer trusted. Laura spent those 3 days in communication with Earth, explaining the situation to increasingly alarmed officials back home. The Secretary General of the United Nations held emergency sessions. Military commanders quietly moved their forces to higher alert status. Billions of ordinary citizens watched the news feeds with growing concern, wondering if humanity's first contact with the wider galaxy was about to become humanity's last. On the morning of the 4th day, summoned Laura back to the council chamber. She went alone this time, leaving Danny and the others behind. Whatever was about to happen, she wanted to face it without putting her people at additional risk. The chamber felt different now. The council members who had seemed curious and welcoming 4 days ago now watched her with guarded expressions. They had returned but sat as far from the chamber floor as possible. The Thornbacks had positioned themselves between Laura and the exits, though whether this was to keep her in or to be the first line of defense, she could not tell. Spoke without preamble. The Council has been reviewing the historical records submitted by your people as part of your membership application. We have also accessed our own observation archives. For the past several thousand of your years, various species have conducted long-range surveys of your world. We now have a more complete picture of what humanity truly is. Laura kept her expression neutral. And what have you concluded? A new holographic display activated, showing images that Laura recognized immediately. The Great Wall of China stretching across mountains, the pyramids of Egypt rising from desert sands, the sprawling cities of the modern age glittering with lights visible from orbit. Your species has a compulsion to build, observed. Not just shelters, but monuments, structures that serve no survival purpose except to demonstrate what you are capable of. You reshape your world to match your vision of what it should be. The images shifted. Wars throughout human history played out in silent horror, armies clashing, cities burning. The mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You also have a compulsion to destroy, continued. Your history is soaked in blood. You have waged war against each other continuously for your entire existence as a species. You have developed increasingly efficient methods of killing, progressing from stones and sticks to weapons capable of ending all life on your planet. Laura opened her mouth to respond, but the high speaker raised an appendage to silence her. We are not finished. The display changed again. Now it showed something different. Humans building hospitals, humans feeding the hungry, humans rushing toward disasters to pull survivors from rubble, humans creating art, music, literature, humans exploring the depths of their oceans and the heights of their mountains simply because they wanted to know what was there. This is what confuses us, admitted. You possess every characteristic of a predator species. Your eyes face forward, designed to track prey. Your bodies are optimized for pursuit. Your minds are capable of planning violence generations in advance. By every metric we use to assess threat levels, humanity should be classified as existentially dangerous. The crystalline alien paused, his body shifting through colors that Laura could not interpret. And yet you also demonstrate behaviors that contradict this assessment. You form bonds with other species, even those that could harm you. You sacrifice your own lives to save strangers. You create beauty for its own sake, with no survival benefit whatsoever. You feel guilt and remorse for violence committed by your ancestors generations before you were born. Spoke up from his position near the doors. I have studied warriors my entire life. I have never encountered a species that combines such lethal potential with such apparent compassion. It should not be possible. These traits should be mutually exclusive. Laura saw her opening. May I speak now? Nodded, his light pulsing cautiously. Laura took a deep breath. She had been preparing this speech for 3 days, knowing that everything depended on getting it right. You are correct that we evolved on a harsh world. You are correct that we are capable of tremendous violence. Everything the resonance told you about our history is true. We are persistence predators. We conquered our planet. We built weapons that could destroy everything. These are facts I cannot deny and would not try to deny. She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces watching her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. But you are looking at our history through a lens of fear, and that lens is distorting what you see. Yes, we have waged wars, but we have also ended wars. We have signed treaties. We have built international organizations dedicated to preventing conflict. Every generation, we get a little better at peace. The representative made a soft musical sound that might have been skepticism. You domesticated predators, she sang. You bent wolves to your will. We made friends with them, Laura corrected gently. We did not conquer the wolves. We formed a partnership. They helped us hunt. We shared our food and our warmth with them. Over thousands of years, that partnership became something more. We love our dogs. They are family to us. They sleep in our beds and play with our children. His massive head tilted slightly. You claim to have genuine affection for creatures that were once your enemies. We have genuine affection for almost everything, Laura said, and she felt a small smile tugging at her lips despite the gravity of the situation. We keep predators as pets. We build sanctuaries for endangered species. We mourn the extinction of creatures that died millions of years before we existed. We feel connections to things that have no logical reason to matter to us. She gestured at the holographic display. You showed images of our wars, and they are terrible. I will not pretend otherwise. But for every war we have fought, there are 1,000 acts of kindness that never made it into the history books. Neighbors helping neighbors. Strangers risking their lives for people they will never meet. Doctors traveling across the world to treat diseases in countries they have no connection to. We are capable of great violence, yes, but we are also capable of great love. His colors shifted again, settling into something Laura thought might be contemplation. You speak well, the High Speaker said slowly. But words are easy. The Council must consider actions, not promises. Then consider this action, Laura replied. We came here. We could have stayed on our building our weapons, preparing for conquest. Instead, we built ships and came looking for friends. That is not the behavior of a predator species seeking prey. That is the behavior of a lonely people seeking connection. The chamber fell silent. Laura could see the council members processing her words, weighing them against everything they had learned about humanity over the past few days. She had made her argument. Now all she could do was wait and hope it was enough. Laura's speech bought humanity time, but it did not buy them trust. The council postponed their final decision, and in that delay, disaster unfolded across the galaxy. News of Earth's true designation leaked within hours. Laura never discovered who was responsible, though she suspected one of the delegates whose fear had overwhelmed their judgment. It did not matter. Once the information escaped the council chamber, it spread like fire through dry grass. Prime, the nursery of soldiers. Do not wake what sleeps here. The phrases traveled across communication networks that spanned thousands of light years. Species that had never heard of humanity suddenly learned of them in the worst possible context. The precursor warning, 3 billion years old, was treated as prophecy. Fear became panic. Panic became action. Laura watched helplessly from the diplomatic station as reports flooded in. Trade routes that had been scheduled to pass through human space were being rerouted. Species that had expressed tentative interest in cultural exchanged their ambassadors. 3 separate civilizations began fortifying their borders against a human invasion that existed only in their terrified imaginations. Danny found her in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars with tired eyes. There is a proposal being circulated among the outer council members, he said quietly, sitting down beside her. The Concordat is pushing for a preemptive quarantine of the Sol system. Laura closed her eyes. Of course they are. They want to blockade Earth, cut us off from the rest of the galaxy before we can spread further. Some of the more extreme factions are suggesting more permanent solutions. You mean they want to destroy us? Danny did not answer. He did not need to. Laura had been a diplomat for 40 years. She had negotiated treaties between nations that hated each other. She had found common ground in situations everyone said were hopeless, but she had never faced anything like this. How do you negotiate with fear? How do you reason with panic? We need to do something, Danny said. We cannot just sit here and wait for them to decide our fate. What would you suggest? We have no fleet here. We have no weapons. We have 4 humans and a diplomatic vessel against the combined military power of 12 spacefaring civilizations. Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. Maybe that is exactly our advantage. Laura turned to look at him. Explain. They fear us because they think we are dangerous. They imagine human armadas conquering the galaxy, human soldiers overwhelming their defenses. But look at us. Danny gestured at himself, at Laura, at the empty lounge around them. We are not an invasion force. We are 4 people who came here looking for friends. That is the story we need to tell. I already told that story. The council was not convinced. You told it to the council. You spoke like a diplomat, with careful words and measured arguments. Maybe that was the wrong approach. Laura frowned. What other approach is there? Danny stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. My grandmother survived a flood when she was a little girl. Her whole town was underwater. She was trapped on the roof of her house with her family, watching everything they owned wash away. And then strangers came. People in boats who had driven hours from other towns, risking their own lives to save people they had never met. My grandmother always said that was the day she understood what humanity really was. Not the flood, not the destruction, but the strangers who came to help. He turned back to Laura. The galaxy has heard about our wars and our weapons and They have not heard about the strangers in boats. They have not heard about the firefighters who run into burning buildings. They have not heard about the doctors who walk into plague zones. They have not heard about the ordinary humans who see suffering and move toward it instead of away. Laura felt something shift inside her. Danny was right. She had been trying to argue humanity's case like a lawyer presenting evidence to a court. But this was not a legal proceeding. This was a species on trial for the crime of being terrifying. "I need to speak to the council again," she said, rising from her seat. "Will they listen?" "I do not know, but I know what I need to say now." She found in his private chambers, the high speaker's crystalline form dim with exhaustion. The past days had been difficult for everyone, but carried the additional burden of trying to maintain order among 12 panicking civilizations. "Ambassador Mitchell," he said when she entered, "I was not expecting you. I need to address the full council one more time." His colors flickered. "I am not certain that is wise. Tensions are extremely high. Several delegations have called for your immediate expulsion from the station." "I understand, but I have something new to say, something I should have said from the beginning." The high speaker studied her for a long moment. Whatever he saw in her expression must have convinced him, because he slowly nodded. "I will arrange it, but Laura, I must warn you. This will be your final opportunity. If you cannot convince them this time, I will not be able to protect your people from what comes next." Laura met his gaze steadily. "I understand. Thank you for everything you have done to give us a fair hearing." The alien's colors shifted to something that might have been surprise. "You thank me, even though I have allowed your species to be branded as monsters." "You did not brand us. You asked questions and sought answers. That is all anyone can do when faced with something they do not understand. I only wish more beings in this galaxy had your patience." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. When I speak to the council tomorrow, I am going to tell them the truth about humanity, not the truth they have been hearing from their fear. The truth I know in my heart. I hope they will listen." Slight pulsed gently. "For what it is worth, Ambassador, I hope so too." The council chamber felt different on this final day. The fear was still present, but it had hardened into something colder. Several delegations attended only through holographic projection, unwilling to be in physical proximity to Laura. The Thornbacks had doubled their security presence. The Sat huddled together, their musical voices silent. Laura stood alone at the center of the floor. She had asked Danny and the others to remain in their quarters. This was not the time for a delegation. This was the time for one human to speak from the heart. Called the chamber to order, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy. "The council recognizes Ambassador Laura Mitchell of Earth for final remarks. Following her statement, we will vote on humanity's petition for membership and on the various proposals for protective measures against the species known as humans. Ambassador, you may proceed." Laura looked around the chamber. She saw fear in some faces, hostility in others, and in a few, a desperate hope that she might say something to make all of this easier. She began quietly, her voice carrying through the perfect acoustics of the ancient room. "I am not going to apologize for what humanity is. Everything you have learned about us is true. We evolved on a. We are persistence predators. We survived things that should have killed us, and we emerged from each catastrophe stronger than before. We built weapons capable of destroying our own planet and then chose not to use them. These are facts." The chamber stirred uneasily. This was not the direction they had expected her to take. "But I am going to tell you something else that is also true. Something your archives and your surveys and your ancient warnings did not capture. I am going to tell you about who we really are, not as a species, but as people." She took a breath. There was a human named Porter. He was a firefighter in a small town in America. One night, a building caught fire with families trapped inside. The structure was unstable. His commanders ordered everyone to stay back, to wait for the flames to die down. When in any way, he made 12 trips into that burning building. 12 times he ran into the flames and came out carrying someone who could not save themselves. On his 13th trip, the building collapsed, died, and the last thing he did with his life was push a stranger toward safety. Laura paused, letting the silence settle. There was a doctor named Maria. She specialized in infectious diseases. When an epidemic broke out in a remote region, she volunteered to go. Her family begged her not to. The disease was killing half the people it infected. She went anyway. She spent 3 months in a quarantine zone, treating patients who had no one else to help them. She caught the disease herself. While she was sick, barely able to stand, she kept working because there was no one to replace her. She survived, but only barely. When asked why she took such risks, she said she could not stand by while people suffered if there was anything she could do. The Thornback ambassador leaned forward slightly, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. There was a young man named Tyler Brooks. He was 18 years old when a flood destroyed his town. He had no training, no special skills, just a small boat and a stubborn refusal to let his neighbors drown. He spent 48 hours without sleep pulling people from rooftops and trees, guided only by their screams and a flashlight that kept dying. He saved 37 people. When the water finally receded, he collapsed from exhaustion and had to be hospitalized. He said afterward that he did not feel like a hero. He said he just did what anyone would do. Laura's voice grew stronger. That is who we are. Yes, we are the species that can chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. But we are also the species that uses that same endurance to run toward disasters instead of away. Yes, we tamed predators and bent them to our will. But we also fell in love with them and made them part of our families. Yes, we built weapons capable of ending worlds. But we also built hospitals and schools and organizations dedicated to ensuring that no one suffers alone. She looked directly at the delegation, watching their feathers shiver with residual fear. You are afraid of us because we survived, but you should understand what surviving actually means. It means we know what suffering feels like. It means we understand pain and loss and fear on a level that species from gentler worlds cannot imagine. And because we know those things, we have developed an overwhelming drive to prevent them. Every terrifying adaptation you see in us has a mirror image that you are not seeing. Our capacity for violence is matched by our capacity for protection. Our endurance in pursuit is matched by our endurance in care. Our ability to destroy is matched by our compulsion to save. His colors had shifted to something Laura had not seen before, a soft golden glow that seemed to pulse with each word she spoke. You see monsters when you look at us, but monsters do not cross the void seeking friendship. Monsters do not stand before their enemies and ask for peace. Monsters do not send their ambassadors unarmed into chambers full of beings who want to destroy them. Laura spread her hands, showing them how empty they were. We are exactly as dangerous as you fear, and we are choosing every single day to be kind instead. That choice is what makes us human, not our biology, not our history, not that forged us. The choice to see suffering and move toward it. The choice to see fear and answer it with compassion. The choice to possess the power to destroy and instead build something better. She looked at, meeting the ancient warrior's eyes. You asked once what would happen if we chose differently, if we decided to become the monsters you fear. The Thornback shifted uncomfortably, but did not look away. Here is my answer. If that day ever comes, you will be glad we are on your side. But I do not believe that day will ever come, because we have spent our entire existence as a species making the opposite choice. Over and over, generation after generation, we choose kindness, we choose connection, we choose hope. Laura lowered her hands and simply stood there, one small human in a chamber built by civilizations that had existed for millions of years. I am not asking you to stop being afraid of us. I am asking you to understand that fear and worthiness are not mutually exclusive. We can be the most dangerous species you have ever encountered and still be worthy of friendship. These two things can both be true at the same time. The chamber fell into absolute silence. Then did something unexpected. The massive Thornback rose from his seat, crossed the chamber floor, and stood before Laura. He towered over her, his armored form capable of crushing her with a single blow. And then he bowed, a warrior's bow, a gesture of respect from one soldier to another. "I have known many warriors in my long life," said, his rumbling voice carrying through the chamber. "I have never met one who fights harder for peace than you do, Ambassador. I vote to accept humanity into the Council." One by one, the other delegations followed. The remaining species, even their musical voices trembling but resolute. When the vote was counted, it was unanimous. Laura Mitchell stood in the ancient chamber of the Galactic Council, representing a species born on a forged by catastrophe, capable of destruction beyond imagination. And humanity was welcomed home.